He thought the danger was waiting somewhere far away in the city, but the warning came from a little girl standing barefoot in the rain. Rain slid down the neon signs of Koreatown, Manhattan in silver streaks, turning the crowded street into a river of blurred headlights and reflected colors, while 9-year-old Lily Brooks sat beneath the narrow awning of a closed convenience store with a plastic container full of handmade bracelets resting in her lap. Her small fingers moved carefully through strands of blue and gold thread, while passing strangers ignored her completely, their coats pulled tight against the cold November wind. Across the street, the Imperial Crescent Hotel glowed like a palace of glass and marble, its entrance crowded with black SUVs, security men in dark suits, and wealthy guests disappearing into warmth and luxury that felt 1,000 miles away from the soaked sneakers on Lily's feet. She had been outside for almost 4 hours, trying to earn enough money to help her grandfather pay the electric bill before it got shut off again. Most people walked past her without even looking down. A few dropped dollar bills into her cup without stopping. But Lily had learned a long time ago that invisible people notice things others didn't. And tonight, she noticed everything. 2 security guards stood near the side entrance of the hotel smoking cigarettes beneath a flickering light while speaking quietly in Arabic, their voices low beneath the sound of rain hitting the pavement. Lily wasn't trying to listen. She simply froze the moment she heard the language. Her father used to speak Arabic in their tiny apartment late at night when he thought she was asleep, practicing old military translations from his years overseas before the nightmares took him away piece by piece. He had taught her little phrases like games when she was younger. Colors, numbers, warnings, simple things a child would remember. And one phrase he repeated more than any other made her blood run cold the instant she heard it now. When the song ends, the car burns. Lily's fingers tightened around the bracelets. Her breathing stopped. One of the guards glanced toward the hotel entrance and answered quietly, "After he enters." The other man nodded once. Calm, casual, like they were discussing the weather instead of something terrible. Lily's stomach twisted so hard it hurt. Her father had once explained those words to her during a thunderstorm when she was 7 years old. Not all dangerous people shouted, he'd said. The worst ones sounded calm. The song ends. The car burns. It was code, a warning about an explosion. Lily slowly looked across the street toward the line of black Escalades waiting beneath the hotel lights. Then the crowd near the entrance suddenly shifted. Men with earpieces straightened immediately. Umbrellas opened in perfect synchronization. And Ethan Kong stepped out of the revolving doors like the city itself had paused for him. Even from across the street, he carried the kind of silence that made powerful men nervous. Tall, sharp black overcoat, dark hair brushed neatly back, his expression unreadable beneath the glow of the hotel lights while bodyguards formed a moving wall around him. People lowered their voices as he passed. Some looked away entirely. Lily had heard his name before in whispers at grocery stores and laundromats. The Korean boss who owned half the buildings in the neighborhood. The man nobody crossed twice. Ethan Kong moved toward the waiting SUV while rain tapped softly against the polished black paint. Lily looked back toward the guards near the alley. One of them checked his watch. The other crushed his cigarette beneath his shoe. And suddenly her father's voice echoed so loudly in her memory, it almost felt alive. If you ever hear that phrase, Lily, run away from the car. Fear hit her all at once. Sharp, heavy. But when Ethan reached for the SUV door, Lily did the one thing nobody expected. She ran straight into the street through the rain, her bracelets scattering across the pavement behind her as she screamed with everything she had left. Don't get in that car. The entire hotel entrance froze. Rain hammered against the sidewalk while Lily stood in the middle of the street breathing hard, soaked hair clinging to her face as the final echo of her scream disappeared beneath the sound of traffic. One bracelet rolled slowly through a puddle beside her sneaker before stopping near the polished tire of the black Escalade. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then the bodyguards reacted all at once. Get her back! One of them barked as 2 men rushed forward through the rain. Lily flinched when rough hands grabbed her shoulders and pulled her away from the vehicle. The plastic container slipped from her arms completely, colorful bracelets scattering across the wet pavement like spilled confetti beneath the hotel lights. Please, Lily cried, struggling to point toward the SUV. Do not get in the car. Her voice cracked with panic. One guard looked furious. Another looked embarrassed, glancing nervously toward hotel guests now whispering beneath the awning. To them, she looked like another homeless kid causing trouble outside a luxury hotel. Nothing more. Ethan Kong had not moved. He stood beside the open SUV door, one hand resting calmly against the black frame while rain collected on the shoulders of his coat. His face remained unreadable, but his dark eyes stayed fixed on the little girl as if trying to understand something nobody else noticed. "Search her," one guard muttered. "This could be distraction." Lily's chest tightened instantly. That word, distraction. Her father used to say dangerous men always assumed fear was a trick first. One of the guards checked her hoodie pockets roughly and found nothing except tangled bracelet strings and 12 damp dollar bills folded carefully beside an old grocery receipt. "She is clean," the man said. "Just some kid." "No," Lily whispered desperately. "I heard them." Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm enough to silence everyone around him instantly. "Heard who?" Lily looked toward the alley near the side entrance, but the two Arabic-speaking guards were already gone. Vanished. Her stomach dropped. "The men by the hotel wall," she said quickly. "They said after you get in the car." She swallowed hard, struggling to remember every word exactly the way her father taught her. "They said the song ends, and then the car burns." Several guards exchanged confused looks immediately. One gave a short laugh. Under his breath. "What is she talking about?" another muttered. But Ethan did not laugh. His expression changed almost invisibly. Not fear. Not belief. Calculation. "Where did you hear that phrase before?" he asked. Lily hesitated. Rainwater dripped from her eyelashes while passing headlights reflected across the street like broken glass. "My dad," she whispered. "He worked translating overseas before he got sick. He told me those words mean danger." One guard stepped closer to Ethan. "Boss, this is wasting time. We already swept the vehicles." Another nodded quickly. "Police detail checked the route 15 minutes ago." Still, Ethan did not move toward the SUV. Instead, he looked carefully at Lily again. Not at her clothes. Not at the soaked sneakers or trembling hands. At her eyes. And what he saw there unsettled him. Because children who lied usually looked at people. This little girl kept staring at the vehicle, like she was waiting for it to do something terrible. Ethan slowly removed his hand from the SUV door. Around them, the city continued moving without noticing how thin the line between ordinary life and disaster could become. Horns echoed in the distance. Steam rose from subway vents. Somewhere nearby, music drifted faintly from a karaoke bar down the block. Then one of Ethan's senior guards leaned closer. "Sir," he said quietly, "we should leave now." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. For years, surviving his world depended on instincts sharper than everyone else around him. And right now, every instinct told him the terrified little girl standing barefoot in the rain believed every word she said. Ethan took one slow step backward away from the SUV. And at that exact moment, somewhere deep beneath the vehicle, a faint mechanical click echoed through the storm. The sound that followed was not loud at first. It was small, sharp, metallic, like a soda can snapping open somewhere beneath the storm. Ethan Kang's eyes narrowed instantly. Every bodyguard around him stiffened at the exact same moment, years of training reacting before thought could catch up. "Move," someone shouted as Ethan grabbed the nearest guard by the shoulder and pulled him backward, away from the SUV. Lily barely had time to gasp before a sudden wave of heat burst outward from beneath the vehicle, followed by a violent flash of orange light that reflected across the rain-soaked street. The Escalade rocked hard against the curb as windows shattered outward in glittering pieces, alarms screaming through the night, while hotel guests ducked beneath the awning in panic. Lily covered her ears instinctively and dropped to the wet pavement, her small body shaking as smoke rolled upward into the cold Manhattan air. For several endless seconds, the entire block dissolved into confusion. Tires screeched nearby. People shouted over one another. Hotel security rushed guests back inside, while Ethan's men formed a tight wall around him, scanning rooftops and alleyways with terrifying precision. But Ethan himself did not look at the burning SUV. He looked directly at Lily. The little girl sat trembling beside the curb with rainwater soaking through her jeans, colorful bracelet strings tangled around her fingers like tiny lifelines. She looked terrified, not proud, not excited, terrified, as if she still could not believe what she had just witnessed. One bodyguard stormed toward her angrily. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Talk now." Lily flinched so hard, she almost fell backward. "I do not know anything," she cried. "I just heard them talking." The man grabbed her arm, but Ethan's voice cut through the chaos immediately. "Enough." Silence hit instantly around him. Ethan stepped closer through drifting smoke and flashing police lights from the far end of the block. Up close, he looked even more intimidating than before. Rain slid down the sharp lines of his face while his black coat moved slightly in the wind. Yet something in his expression had changed. Not softness. Ethan Kong was not a soft man. But the cold distance in his eyes now carried something else. Attention. Careful attention. Lily slowly looked up at him. Her father used to tell her powerful men were the most dangerous when they became quiet. Ethan crouched slightly until he was closer to her eye level. "What is your name?" he asked calmly. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Brooks." "How old are you?" 9. One of the guards muttered under his breath in disbelief. Ethan ignored him completely. "You understood the language because of your father?" Lily nodded slowly. "He used to translate for soldiers overseas before he got sick." Ethan studied her face carefully. Children were difficult to read for most people. Not for him. Fear he understood. Lies he understood even better. And nothing about this little girl felt rehearsed. Her breathing was uneven. Her hands would not stop shaking. She kept glancing toward the destroyed SUV like she expected another explosion at any second. That was real fear, not performance. Sirens grew louder in the distance now, bouncing off the glass towers surrounding Koreatown. Ethan stood slowly and looked toward his security team. "Lock down the area," he ordered quietly. "Nobody leaves." The guards immediately moved. Phones came out. Orders spread rapidly. The entire mood of the street shifted from confusion to controlled urgency. Ethan turned back toward Lily one final time. "Where is your family?" Lily hesitated. "My grandfather is waiting for me at home." "Where is home?" She gave a small address in Queens, almost too quietly to hear. Ethan nodded once, then glanced at the soaked cardboard sign beside her scattered bracelets. Handmade bracelets, $5 each. The edges had begun dissolving from the rain. For reasons he did not fully understand, something about that sign unsettled him more than the destroyed SUV behind him. A child should not have been outside alone in weather like this trying to keep her lights on. Ethan removed his suit jacket slowly and handed it toward her. Lily blinked in shock. "You are freezing," he said simply. Around them, the street remained filled with smoke, flashing lights, and frightened whispers. But for the first time that night, Ethan Kong stopped thinking about who wanted him dead. He started wondering why the person who saved him was a little girl selling bracelets in the rain. The rain finally began to slow 20 minutes later, but the street outside the Imperial Crescent still looked like the aftermath of a nightmare nobody could fully explain. Police barricades blocked traffic while flashing red and blue lights painted the wet pavement in restless colors. Hotel guests stood crowded behind glass windows whispering to one another as smoke drifted upward from the destroyed SUV. Yet inside the black armored sedan parked half a block away, the world felt strangely quiet. Lily sat stiffly in the leather backseat wrapped inside Ethan Kang's oversized suit jacket, her small hands gripping a paper cup of hot chocolate so tightly the lid trembled. She had never been inside a car like this before. Everything smelled faintly of cedar wood and expensive cologne. Even the silence felt expensive. Across from her, Ethan sat perfectly still while one of his security men spoke rapidly through an earpiece near the front seat. "The vehicle was cleaned 30 minutes ago," the guard said carefully. "No signs of tampering during inspection." Ethan's expression remained unreadable. "That means whoever planted it had access after the sweep." The guard hesitated. "Yes, sir." Lily lowered her eyes toward the cup in her hands. She knew she should probably be scared of Ethan Kong. Everybody in the neighborhood was. Grocery store owners lowered their voices when his name came up. Men twice her grandfather's size crossed streets to avoid his bodyguards. But somehow, sitting here now, she felt less afraid of Ethan than the men who had spoken Arabic behind the hotel. Ethan noticed her watching the steam rising from the drink. "You have not touched it," he said quietly. Lily looked embarrassed. "I did not want to spill anything." Something almost invisible flickered in Ethan's face. Not quite amusement, more surprise. Most adults around him either feared him or tried too hard to impress him. This little girl seemed more worried about staining his car seats. Ethan leaned back slightly, while rainwater slid down the tinted windows beside him. Your father taught you the language? Lily nodded slowly. Some words. What happened to him? The question came gently, but Lily still froze for a second. She looked down at the bracelets still tangled around her wrist. He got sick after he came home, she whispered. Sometimes he forgot things. Sometimes he woke up yelling because of dreams. Her voice softened further. He died 2 years ago. Silence settled heavily inside the car. Ethan looked away briefly toward the police lights outside. Death did not unsettle him anymore. Not usually. But there was something about the way she said it so simply that bothered him. Like losing people had become normal long before a child should understand loss. And your mother? Lily's fingers tightened around the paper cup. She left after Dad got sick. Ethan said nothing after that. Neither did she. The city moved quietly outside while headlights reflected across the rain-covered streets of Manhattan. Finally, the guard in front turned halfway around. Sir, detectives are requesting a statement. Ethan nodded once. Tell them later. Yes, sir. The guard glanced briefly toward Lily before lowering his voice carefully. What about the child? Ethan looked at her again. Her wet sneakers barely touched the floor beneath the oversized leather seats. She looked exhausted now that the adrenaline was fading, dark circles visible beneath her eyes despite her age. Children should have been asleep at 9 o'clock on school nights. Not selling bracelets in the rain to keep electricity running. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. We are taking her home first. Lily blinked in surprise. You do not have to do that. Ethan answered immediately. Yes, I do. The response surprised even him. For years, Ethan Kong had survived by keeping emotional distance from everyone around him. Caring made people vulnerable. Vulnerability got people buried. Yet tonight, a little girl with soaked sneakers and trembling hands had stepped in front of danger to save someone she did not even know. And somewhere deep beneath decades of caution and control, that truth unsettled him more than the attack itself. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over Manhattan while the armored sedan slowly pulled away from the flashing lights. Neither Ethan nor Lily noticed the dark SUV parked 3 cars behind them beginning to follow silently through the rain. Queens looked different after midnight. The glass towers and luxury hotels of Manhattan faded behind them, replaced by narrow brick apartment buildings. Flickering laundromat signs and corner stores protected by metal grates pulled halfway down for the night. Rainwater still clung to the streets while the armored sedan rolled quietly through neighborhoods most wealthy people never noticed unless they were speeding past on the highway. Lily sat silently beside the window watching familiar streets pass by beneath blurred reflections of neon lights. Across from her, Ethan Kong noticed every detail without appearing to look at anything at all. The closed pharmacy with a broken sign. The man sleeping beneath newspapers near the subway stairs. The small church with peeling white paint and a flickering cross above the entrance. Places built from survival instead of comfort. He had grown up around places like this before power changed everything around him. Left here, Lily said softly after several blocks. The driver followed her directions immediately. They turned onto a quieter street lined with aging apartment buildings squeezed shoulder to shoulder beneath dim street lights. Laundry fluttered weakly from a fire escape despite the rain. A stray cat darted beneath a parked van. Ethan's security vehicle remained behind them at a careful distance, while another dark SUV stayed farther back near the intersection, almost hidden beneath the shadows. Inside the sedan, Ethan's lead guard noticed it immediately through the side mirror. Sir, he said quietly into his earpiece. Same vehicle from Midtown still behind us. Ethan did not turn around. How long? Since we crossed the bridge. Lily looked between them nervously. Is something wrong? Ethan's expression stayed calm. No, but the slight shift in posture among his security men told a different story entirely. The sedan slowed beside an old 6-story apartment building with faded green doors and cracked concrete steps. One hallway light flickered weakly above the entrance while rain dripped steadily from rusted gutters overhead. Lily looked embarrassed suddenly. This is it. Ethan glanced toward the building. You live here? She nodded quietly. 3rd floor. One guard stepped out first and scanned the sidewalk before opening Lily's door beneath a black umbrella. The little girl climbed out carefully, still wrapped in Ethan's oversized suit jacket that nearly reached her ankles. She hesitated after taking a few steps toward the building, then turned back toward the car. Thank you, she said softly. Ethan studied her face through the rain-speckled window. Lily. She stopped immediately. Do not sell bracelets outside at night anymore. The little girl lowered her eyes. We need the money. Ethan felt something cold settle heavily in his chest at the simplicity of her answer. No self-pity. No complaint. Just truth. Before he could respond, the apartment building entrance suddenly burst open. An elderly man rushed down the stairs wearing an old gray sweater and house slippers despite the cold rain. Lily. His voice shook with panic. The little girl ran straight toward him. Grandpa. The old man dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around her tightly, like he thought she might disappear if he let go. His relief was immediate and overwhelming. I told you not to stay out this late, he whispered shakily into her wet hair. I was so worried. Ethan watched silently from inside the sedan while the grandfather pulled back enough to inspect Lily's face carefully. Then he noticed the line of black vehicles. The security men. The expensive suits. Fear immediately replaced relief in his eyes. He stood slowly in front of Lily protectively despite being nearly 70 years old and visibly exhausted. Ethan recognized that look instantly. A poor man preparing himself to defend the only thing he had left in the world. The old man swallowed hard before speaking carefully toward the car window. Sir, if she caused trouble, I apologize. Ethan stared at him for a long, quiet second. Then he opened the sedan door himself and stepped out into the rain. Every security guard around him straightened instantly while the old man's face lost color. Ethan approached slowly beneath the dim apartment light until he stood only a few feet away from them. Rain tapped softly against the umbrella above him while Lily clutched her grandfather's sleeve nervously. Ethan looked directly at the older man and spoke in a calm voice neither of them would ever forget. Your granddaughter saved my life tonight. The old man stared at Ethan Kong as though the rain itself had suddenly begun speaking back to him. For a moment, he simply stood frozen beneath the weak apartment light, with one protective arm still around Lily's shoulders, while black luxury vehicles lined the curb behind the most feared man in Koreatown. Saved your life? He repeated quietly, almost unable to process the words. Lily looked down at the wet concrete, uncomfortable with the attention now resting entirely on her. Ethan nodded once. There was an attack tonight outside the Imperial Crescent. The old man's expression immediately changed from confusion to alarm as he looked toward his granddaughter again. Lily. She swallowed nervously. I heard some men talking near the hotel. Ethan noticed the grandfather's hand tighten slightly around hers. Fear. Not for himself. For her. That kind of fear always looked the same no matter how old a man became. Sir. The old man said carefully toward Ethan. My granddaughter is a good child. She does not cause trouble. Ethan's eyes moved briefly toward Lily, standing silently beside him in oversized sleeves that nearly covered her hands. I know, he answered. The words landed heavier than he intended. For several quiet seconds, only the sound of dripping rain filled the narrow street. Then Ethan looked toward the apartment building entrance. May I walk her upstairs? The old man blinked in surprise. Men like Ethan Kong did not ask permission often. Still hesitant, he nodded slowly and stepped aside. The three of them climbed the cracked stairwell together while security remained outside. The building smelled faintly of old radiator heat, damp concrete, and somebody cooking onions 2 floors below. Paint peeled from the walls in thin strips, while weak yellow lights flickered overhead every few feet. Lily walked quietly beside Ethan, still clutching the paper cup of now-cold hot chocolate against her chest. On the 3rd floor, her grandfather unlocked apartment 3B with a key attached to a faded Yankees lanyard. The apartment inside was tiny but clean. Old furniture carefully repaired instead of replaced. A small kitchen table pushed beside the window. Family photographs taped near the refrigerator because proper frames cost money they did not have. Ethan's eyes paused briefly on one picture sitting alone near the sink. A smiling man in military fatigues holding a much younger Lily on his shoulders. That was my dad, Lily said softly after noticing him looking. Ethan stepped closer to the photograph. The man looked tired even while smiling. The kind of tired that settled deep behind the eyes and never fully left. His name was Daniel Brooks, the grandfather explained quietly. Translator for the Army overseas. Ethan nodded slowly. And after he came home? The old man lowered his gaze toward the worn kitchen floor. The war came home with him. Silence settled heavily through the apartment. Lily moved quietly to the refrigerator and pulled out a crayon drawing held up by magnets. It showed a man holding her hand beside a bright yellow sun. Arabic letters covered the top in uneven handwriting. "Dad taught me that," she said. "It means protect the people who cannot protect themselves." Ethan stared at the drawing much longer than expected. Something about the uneven childish letters unsettled him in ways he could not explain. Because nobody had taught him lessons like that growing up. The streets that raised Ethan Kong taught survival first. Mercy second. Sometimes never. His phone vibrated suddenly inside his coat pocket. The moment he answered, his lead guard's voice came through low and urgent. "Sir, we confirm the 2 Arabic-speaking guards never worked hotel security. Fake credentials." Ethan's expression darkened instantly. "And the SUV following us?" "Still outside." The room fell quiet again. Lily's grandfather looked nervous immediately. "Is someone following you here?" Ethan did not answer right away. Instead, he looked around the tiny apartment one more time. The patched curtains. The grocery coupons near the microwave. The water stains spreading across the ceiling corner. People like Lily survived entire lives in places powerful men never even noticed existed. Yet somehow this apartment held more honesty than most mansions Ethan had walked through. Finally, he looked toward the old man. "Lock the door after I leave," he said calmly. "Do not open it for anyone except Lily." Fear crossed the grandfather's face immediately. "What is happening?" Ethan glanced once toward the rain-covered window overlooking the street below. "Someone made a mistake tonight," he said quietly, "and now they are trying to fix it." The hallway outside apartment 3B felt colder after Ethan's warning. Lily's grandfather locked the door carefully behind him while the sound of distant thunder rolled across Queens like something restless moving through the city. Inside the apartment, the old radiator hissed unevenly beside the window while Ethan stood near the kitchen table, staring down at the child's drawing still resting beside the refrigerator. "Protect the people who cannot protect themselves." The words lingered in his mind longer than they should have. Ethan Kong had spent 20 years building an empire powerful enough that nobody could corner him again. Men respected him because they feared consequences. Entire neighborhoods changed when he made one phone call. Yet tonight, survival had not come from wealth or power or armed security. It came from a 9-year-old girl with wet sneakers and a memory her father left behind. His phone buzzed again. "Talk," Ethan said quietly. "The SUV outside belongs to a shell company registered in Jersey," his lead guard reported. "Fake paperwork. We also identified one of the dead hotel guards from traffic cameras 2 weeks ago." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who is he?" A pause answered first. "Former security contractor. Worked private military jobs overseas." Ethan's expression darkened immediately. "Professionals. Not random enemies. Not amateurs looking for quick money. Someone had invested serious planning into tonight." "And inside my organization?" Ethan asked calmly. The silence on the line stretched too long. Finally, the guard answered carefully. "We found evidence the route schedule was leaked from internal communications." Lily's grandfather looked up nervously from across the room, even though he could only hear one side of the conversation. Ethan noticed fear settling deeper into the old man's face. The realization that whatever happened tonight was bigger than ordinary crime, bigger than television stories, bigger than anything people in buildings like this wanted near their families. Ethan ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Sir," the grandfather said quietly, "if Lily is in danger because she helped you." Ethan interrupted immediately. "Nobody will touch her." The certainty in his voice changed the entire room. Not loud, not dramatic, absolute. Lily looked up from the couch, where she sat wrapped inside his suit jacket like a blanket. "Why would someone want to hurt you?" she asked softly. Most adults would never ask Ethan Kong a question like that directly. But children still believed honesty mattered more than fear. Ethan looked toward the rain-covered window for several long seconds before answering. "Because power makes people greedy." Lily frowned slightly, trying to understand. Ethan surprised himself by continuing. "When I was your age, my family lived in one room above a grocery store in Brooklyn. My mother worked 16 hours a day sewing clothes." Lily listened carefully. "Were you poor?" Ethan gave the smallest nod. "Very." The old man looked genuinely shocked hearing that answer. The newspapers painted Ethan Kong as if he had stepped into the world wearing expensive suits and gold watches. Nobody imagined the beginning. Ethan's eyes drifted toward the worn apartment walls around him. My father owed money to dangerous men, he said quietly. One winter we lost heat for 2 weeks because he could not pay them back. Lily glanced toward the rattling radiator instinctively. Ethan noticed. I promised myself I would never be powerless again. Silence filled the apartment afterward. Heavy. Honest. Then Lily asked the one question nobody else around Ethan dared ask anymore. Did becoming powerful make you happy? The room went completely still. Even the old man looked stunned. Ethan stared at the little girl across from him while rain tapped softly against the glass beside them. In boardrooms and nightclubs and private meetings, people measured Ethan Kong by fear, by money, by influence. But no one had asked him something so simple in years. And for the first time that night, Ethan did not have an answer ready. A sudden flash of headlights swept across the apartment window from the street below. Ethan moved instantly toward the curtain. The dark SUV still sat parked beneath the broken streetlight across from the building. Engine running. Watching. Ethan's face hardened immediately. Then Lily quietly stepped beside him and looked down toward the street too. Those are the men who followed us, she whispered. Ethan studied the reflection of the SUV in the rain-soaked pavement below while something cold settled into his chest again. Whoever failed tonight was not giving up. And now they knew exactly where Lily Brooks lived. The dark SUV remained parked across the street for almost 10 minutes without moving. Its headlights stayed off, hidden beneath the weak glow of the broken street lamp, while rainwater slid slowly across the windshield. Inside apartment 3B, nobody spoke much anymore. Even Lily seemed to understand something dangerous had shifted. Ethan stood near the window with one hand inside his coat pocket, while his eyes tracked every reflection below with cold precision. Behind him, Lily's grandfather quietly made tea in the tiny kitchen because some people survived fear by needing their hands to stay busy. Sir, the old man said carefully after a long silence, you should leave before more trouble follows you here. Ethan did not look away from the window. It already followed me here. The honesty of the answer settled heavily through the apartment. Lily sat curled on the couch, hugging her knees beneath Ethan's oversized jacket while thunder rolled softly outside. Are they going to hurt us? She whispered. Ethan turned toward her immediately. No, again that same absolute certainty filled his voice. But this time Lily noticed something else beneath it. Anger. Not loud anger. The dangerous kind that became quieter instead of louder. Ethan's phone vibrated once more. He answered immediately. Talk. His lead guard's voice came low through the speaker. Sir, we traced the internal leak. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who? A pause followed. Long enough to change the entire room before the answer even came. Victor Hahn. Ethan went completely still. Lily's grandfather looked confused, but Ethan's face hardened in a way that made the apartment suddenly feel colder. Victor Hahn had worked beside Ethan for 12 years. Trusted with schedules, meetings, security routes. One of the few men allowed near Ethan without being searched first. You are certain? Ethan asked quietly. Yes, sir. Financial transfers hit offshore accounts yesterday morning. We also recovered deleted communications between Hahn and the contractors connected to tonight. Ethan said nothing after that. Outside, rain continued sliding down the apartment windows in silver lines while Queens traffic hummed faintly several blocks away. Betrayal never shocked Ethan anymore. But this one settled deeper than expected. Because loyalty was the only currency he truly respected. Finally, he spoke again. Bring him to the warehouse. Alive? The guard asked carefully. Ethan's eyes drifted briefly toward Lily, sitting on the couch, watching him nervously. Yes, he answered calmly. I want answers first. He ended the call and slipped the phone away. Lily studied him quietly for a moment. Your friend lied to you? She asked softly. Ethan almost corrected her automatically. Men like Victor Hahn were not friends. They were business, strategy, necessary alliances. But somehow, hearing the question from a child made the lie feel pointless. Yes, Ethan admitted. Lily looked down at the frayed bracelet string around her wrist. My dad used to say people who hurt you are usually close enough to shake your hand first. Ethan stared at her in silence. The words landed harder than she realized. Across the room, the old man slowly set 3 chipped coffee mugs on the kitchen table. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. Lily smiled faintly for the first time all night. He was. Ethan looked again toward the family photograph near the refrigerator. Daniel Brooks, smiling in military uniform while carrying his daughter on his shoulders. A man forgotten by almost everyone except the child still trying to live by his lessons. Suddenly, headlights swept across the apartment walls. Again, the dark SUV outside finally moved. Slowly, deliberately. Ethan stepped toward the window immediately as the vehicle rolled halfway down the block before stopping directly beneath apartment 3B. Then the driver's side window lowered slightly. Lily's grandfather froze. Lily instinctively moved closer to Ethan without even realizing it. Down below, a man stepped out holding something small in his hand. Not a weapon, an envelope. He placed it carefully on the sidewalk beneath the building entrance before returning to the SUV. Seconds later, the vehicle disappeared into the rain without another sound. Silence swallowed the apartment. Ethan stared at the envelope below for several long seconds before speaking into his earpiece. Do not touch it until bomb squad clears it. One guard acknowledged immediately from outside. But even from the third-floor window, Ethan could already see 3 words written across the front in black marker large enough to read through the rain. We see her. By sunrise, the rain had finally stopped over Queens. Water still dripped from fire escapes and broken gutters, while pale morning light spread slowly across the city like it was trying to pretend the night before had never happened. But inside apartment 3B, nobody had slept much. Lily sat near the window wearing clean pajamas borrowed from a neighbor downstairs while her grandfather quietly cooked eggs in the tiny kitchen with shaking hands that still had not fully steadied. Ethan Kong remained seated at the small kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling beside him while security updates moved constantly through the phone pressed against his ear. Victor Hahn confessed to leaking the route. His lead guard reported quietly. He believed the organization needed younger leadership. Ethan stared silently at the steam rising from his coffee. 12 years of loyalty traded for ambition. In his world, betrayal always arrived wearing a familiar face. And the contractors? Ethan asked. Gone before sunrise. They cleared every location we had. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Professional. Disciplined. Expensive. But none of that mattered anymore. Because they had made one fatal mistake. They threatened a child under his protection. Ethan ended the call and looked across the apartment toward Lily drawing quietly at the table with a box of old crayons. The little girl glanced up nervously. Are the bad men gone? Ethan surprised himself with how gently he answered. They will not come near you again. Lily studied his face carefully, as if deciding whether powerful men could tell the truth. Then she nodded once and returned to her drawing. Ethan watched her for a long moment before speaking again. You should not miss school today. Lily looked embarrassed immediately. I already missed 2 days this month. Her grandfather sighed tiredly from the stove. The landlord shut off the heat last week. She got sick. Ethan's eyes moved slowly across the apartment again. The patch walls. The old radiator barely working. The overdue bills stacked carefully beside the microwave as if organizing problems somehow made them smaller. He had walked through penthouses larger than this entire floor. Yet somehow this cramped apartment carried more dignity than half the rich men he knew. A quiet knock sounded at the door. Every security guard outside stiffened instantly before one voice came calmly through the hallway. Delivery for Miss Lily Brooks. Ethan nodded toward the grandfather. Open it. The old man hesitated before unlocking the door carefully. 2 men in dark suits stood outside holding several large shopping bags and a folded document envelope. Behind them, workers were already carrying brand new space heaters up the stairs. Lily blinked in confusion. What is happening? Ethan reached for the envelope and placed it gently on the table beside her crayons. Your rent is paid for the next 3 years, he said simply. The old man looked stunned. Sir, we cannot accept. Yes, you can. Ethan's voice remained calm, but left no room for argument. Lily opened the envelope slowly with small trembling fingers. Inside sat enrollment papers for St. Catherine Academy, one of the best private schools in Queens. Her eyes widened instantly. This school is for rich kids, she whispered. Ethan looked directly at her. No, it is for smart kids. Silence filled the apartment again. Heavy. Emotional. The grandfather suddenly lowered himself into a kitchen chair, overwhelmed beyond words. For years he had worked maintenance jobs, skipped meals, and hidden overdue notices from Lily just trying to keep them afloat after his son died. And now, Because one brave little girl chose courage over fear, everything was changing. Ethan stood slowly near the window as morning sunlight finally broke through the clouds outside. Down below, the black SUVs waited quietly beside the curb while the neighborhood slowly woke around them. Kids walked toward school with backpacks too heavy for their shoulders. Shop owners rolled open metal gates. Ordinary people beginning ordinary mornings without realizing how close danger had come during the night. Lily walked toward Ethan holding the crayon drawing she had finished. It showed a tall man in a black coat standing beside a little girl beneath bright yellow sunlight. Above them, in uneven childish handwriting, she had written the Arabic phrase her father taught her years ago. Protect the people who cannot protect themselves. Ethan stared at the drawing for several silent seconds before carefully folding it and placing it inside his coat pocket like something priceless. Then he looked down at Lily one final time. Your father would be proud of you, he said quietly. The little girl smiled through tears. She had tried very hard not to cry. And as Ethan Kong stepped into the hallway surrounded once again by armed security and silence, something inside him had shifted in a way power and money never could. Because the most feared man in Koreatown survived not because of wealth, weapons, or loyal soldiers. He survived because one little girl selling $5 bracelets in the rain chose to care about a stranger. And that morning, for the first time in many years, Ethan Kong remembered what dignity looked like.